And most guys would never expect that. They think, oh, I'm gonna hire some guy to put me in suits and to tell me that if I dress this way, I'm gonna get the job. It's not that at all. It's we're gonna find out who you are so that that's what you really see in the mirror every day. It's not a small version of who you are, but the biggest, fullest version of who you are. And then that's what you start to become. That's how you act.
Welcome back to Ignition Point. I'm Debbie Hart.
Sean Finnegan.
Today we have Tanner Guzy, a style coach for men. So tell us more about your business.
First of all, look at him.
I mean,
you could tell he's a walking billboard.
Thank you.
Very
You're right.
debonair. You
Yeah.
obviously practice what you preach.
Yeah.
Do men just get drawn to you to learn about style because of
No.
how you show up and
No,
look?
not at
I
all.
mean, how did you come up with this idea and how do you get clients?
Yeah, okay, fun questions. I started a blog 12 years ago when people were still blogging. And for some reason, it really just kind of picked up some momentum and turned into email campaigns and social media. And eventually I worked in custom suiting for a few years and then kind of struck out on my own about 7 years ago and went the high ticket coaching route, which has been really fun. But it's hard finding clients because you know how Netflix says that their biggest competitor is sleep? My biggest competitor is not other people that do what I do. There's not really anybody else who does what I do. It's competing with the attitude that real men don't care how they look. And that there's this cultural programming, especially amongst like Gen X and millennials, that somehow it's vain or dishonorable or effeminate or whatever other pejorative you want to throw at it for a guy to look like he cares about his clothing, and then certainly to invest in having somebody teach him how to care about it. And so that's always the
your
fun
biggest
hurdle to
competitor.
get. Oh, 100% is that mindset is the biggest competitor to get past. Yeah.
So is most of your marketing educational then?
No, actually, most of my marketing has very little to do with style. It is proving my bona fides in other spaces, whether that's entrepreneurship, fitness, fatherhood, family, all of these other things. And it's like, okay, if this is somebody that I can see is legitimate in these spaces, and then he says that I should care about my clothes, maybe I should actually care about my clothes. So it's really like
Hard to lead off with the clothing.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, style.
Totally. So I have
Right.
to prove that I'm somebody worth listening to in other arenas, and then the specialty is style, and then it kind of expands out from there. So it's been really fun to figure all that out over the last 10 years.
What was your premise of your TED Talk? And you've also written a book.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. And they both really are kind of rooted in the same thing. It's the idea that clothing is a visual language. And if you think about it, the animal kingdom uses it. Lions have big manes, gorillas have their silverbacks. You have pufferfish that get big in order to intimidate. You've got courting rituals and male peacocks that are beautiful. And so the animal kingdom essentially communicates either I'm horny or I'm dangerous through their appearance, right? Like
True.
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Right.
But man is so much more evolved than beast, and we create entire languages out of it. It's ways to communicate status or authority, or I belong to this group, or I don't belong to that group, or I have this position within the hierarchy. And not only a way to communicate with other people, but ways that we change our own self-perception. And so it affects our confidence, it affects our sense of identity. And that's my whole job, is to teach guys how to be able to become visually articulate to the same extent that they are articulate with the written and the spoken language too.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So do you think people think of style coach and they're like, oh man, I got to wear stuffy
totally.
sports coats now
Yep.
because I'm now styling up? Or
Absolutely.
can they be more stylish in what they really want to be?
Very few of my guys actually end up wearing suits because the suit is the uniform of the 20th century, and we've kind of moved beyond that to a very large extent. I think COVID really put the nail in that coffin. And it's also really interesting because we used to be a very homogenous culture in the West where it didn't matter racially if you were white collar or blue collar, if you lived in a big city or you were more rural. If you were a man who wanted to be in a situation where you were taken seriously, you wore a suit. But that's not the case anymore. Nobody's wearing suits in your offices, right? How often are you in
Yeah.
one other than
Never.
very specific contexts, right? And
Maybe one
so-
of those T-shirts that's tuxedo.
Yeah, the tux t-shirt. All of my clients do end up in those. And even now, like, you don't see them as frequently as funerals. I've been surprised to see that.
Yeah.
But it's basically weddings, like very specific career fields, specific religions will still embrace them. But other than that, it's not that ubiquitous anymore. And so the challenge now is for each man to figure out the world in which he lives and the language of clothing and how it's spoken within that world, and then to dress in a way that he can actually navigate in that world. And so that's where it's really fun, because all of my guys end up dressing very differently, because my guy who's an attorney in Vegas will definitely wear suits, but that's different than a guy who lives in Wisconsin and runs a roofing company, or a guy who's 25 and he owns a tech company and he's based out of Florence, Italy, or a guy, you're all over the place, and so their style ends up being all over the place.
Based on their personality and what they're. So what would your recommendations be for this?
You want to break this down?
Well, the thing that I love, the thing that I noticed this about Sean the first time that we met, is the biggest thing is that there's a level of intentionality about your style, right? And I think that that's where most guys need to be. I think a lot of guys, they either fall to the space of, I dress in a way that is so unnoticeable that I don't want anybody to have any expectations of me, or it's so flamboyant that it gives off this sense of like, I'm really insecure if I'm not the center of attention. And the sweet spot is actually right where you are, which is, I'm comfortable if you pay attention to me. It's also not that big of a deal if I'm not the only thing you're paying attention to as well.
Yeah.
But it'd be really fun to actually like spend some time and break down with you.
I've
what
said
that
this.
looks
I was like, I need to go shopping with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And we'll do the repeat episode,
Yes.
follow-up episode,
Yes.
and you can
We're
do
gonna
a
do it on
runway
site.
model
Yes.
with all
Yeah.
the new outfits.
We'll go through the whole process.
What are all the benefits psychologically for a man to dress, dress for the power?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Okay, so I'm going to paint in kind of broad strokes here, because there's some generalizations. But one of the stereotypes that most of us have grown up with is that women care about their appearance more than men do. And I have found that it's actually quite the opposite, that men are way more invested in their appearance than women are, right? And this is a typical reaction that I
Very
get.
shocked,
But
yes.
the biggest reason why is because for men, our identity is infused into our clothing. We very much, this is why most guys still dress the way that they did in college or in high school, because they solidify who they are, and that's how they see themselves for the rest of their lives. And so to get a guy to change his style, if he doesn't do it the right way, this is why most guys hate being dressed by their wives. It's why they hate working with a stylist, because they're robbed of that sense of identity and given a costume that doesn't actually reflect who they are, right?
Yep.
And so the biggest benefit to this is most guys, they have a fairly small correlation between who I am and how my appearance actually connects with that. And as I help them expand that sense of identity and how it correlates with their clothing, they actually get a bigger sense of who they are. And so they feel more like themselves instead of less like themselves. And so there's more confidence, there's more integrity, there's more risk willingness, there's more charity, there's more, like, all of these things that we are just expands and gets bigger because they have a better and a deeper sense of who they are.
So powerful.
It's cool.
Good,
Yeah. And most guys would never expect that. They think, oh, I'm gonna hire some guy to put me in suits and to tell me that if I dress this way, I'm gonna get the job or I'm gonna get laid or whatever. It's not that at all. It's, we're gonna find out who you are so that that's what you really see in the mirror every day. It's not a small version of who you are, but the biggest, fullest version of who you are. And then that's what you start to become. That's how you act.
What's the name of the book?
The Appearance of Power.
Ooh, that's good. So how do you convince a man that this is going to expand who he is when he's experienced the opposite of that when other
you have
people dress him?
resistance.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk like even specifics like the funnel with all of that and how that looks, or more just kind of like the...
Yeah, maybe give us an example of someone who you worked with who was very resistant
Yeah.
and then transformed.
So I would say it's not very often that I get people that are super resistant with it. By the time they actually get into my ecosystem, they're pretty warmed up with it. But one of the things that I think is the most fun is I have, and it's impactful too, is I have this meme that is essentially, but real men don't care how they look. But then I post up photos of men all throughout history in different cultures, in different times, in different parts of the world that have very obviously cared about how they look. You look at samurais, you look at different tribes in Africa, you look at somebody like George Washington, you look at Genghis Khan and how he used his appearance as he was conquering half of Asia. You look at all of these men who were very clearly masculine men, and they've done big, great things, and they still care about how they look. And it's really fun to create this juxtaposition on social media where it's like, oh, well, real men don't care how they look, but then you see evidence again and again and again and again across all these different cultures that it is something that not only most men have cared about, but ironically, the group of men that cares the most about is the warrior class, the one that most other men would hold as the most masculine. They're the ones that care the most about what they're wearing.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So would you recommend, if people want to engage, do they first get the book? Is that the best way to kind of start getting familiarized
Yep.
with the concept?
It's a great place to start. A caveat to that is that the book is not a how-to book. It is not like, this is how you tie a tie, or
This is
these
the
are the
pattern.
shoes that are
Yeah.
popular
But
for
it's the
summer.
psychology
It's
of
the
what you just
psychology. It really is. It's like
That
appearance
makes so
psychology.
much
Yep.
sense
How
to
to
me,
think
like
about it.
commanding authority with your presence and how you
Exactly.
show up. So what are some of the hardest either challenges you experienced building your business or some of the hardest clients that you've had to deal with, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. I would say that the biggest challenge has really been what we've already addressed. It's just competing with this idea that there's something wrong with me if I do care about this. But it's been really fun because, and I think most entrepreneurs feel this way, especially for me because I'm a solopreneur. I do well enough for myself financially that I'm not looking to I have to scale. I get to manage my schedule and spend time with my kids and everything the way that I want to. But I've had to learn a lot of different jobs, right? And so learning all the concepts of marketing and sales and how to understand what people's pain points are and how to help them see that there's value in this particular solution and how to overcome all of that. That's been one of the most fun things, and that's probably been the biggest solution to that problem. Is you just got to learn how to work through and work around that by doing all the stuff that the people that you interview talk about, or the books that we read. Like, all this stuff is legitimate when you put it into practice.
So powerful. So I got to ask on the jeans.
Yeah,
Kind of skinny jeans.
I know.
Yeah. Is that in right now?
No, in fact,
Yeah.
no. This is actually me kind of holding on to something.
Yeah.
We're in a really interesting time where, especially because I'm 40, right? And if I go to Gen Z, which ironically, I was speaking to a group of men, and they're between the ages of 14 and 18 a couple months ago, and out of the 20 of them that were there were 2 of them that had classic Jenkos. Remember the big
Oh, yeah,
bag,
sure,
you could
yeah.
fit, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
were huge when I was in
Yeah, that was
middle
big.
school.
Yeah.
They're buying them off of eBay. It's legitimately a thing.
Coming back around.
This is almost the new dad gene,
Yeah,
to be
okay.
super skinny on
Got
your
it.
stuff. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen the no-show socks versus the crew socks, and that's how you can tell a millennial versus a Gen Z. Or there's
Yeah.
all these and
Right.
it's so interesting. This is one of the things I help my clients navigate is, especially when you get older, you don't want to be too on trend because you don't want to look like you wish that you were still
Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
There's that
No,
issue,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We see someone come in like that, and you're like, I guess, which I've fallen prey to
Right.
that, where I'm like, I kind of just follow my own path. I'm like, I really like that shirt.
Yes.
And then I try to act like I'm looking too young in the shirt or
Right.
something.
And it doesn't work for us because for men, and again, broad strokes, but for men generally, youth is a liability because you're untested, you don't have any credibility, you don't have any authority. And so when you dress as if that's the stage of life that you're in, as opposed to demonstrating the credibility, the authority, the status that you've earned, it's like, what are you doing? You're throwing all of this away. And it's like you really aren't aware of what it is that you've done with your life, and you wish that you still had all this potential, right? And so you can't go too young, but you can't just hold on to a trend from 10 years ago, because then you just look like you're obtuse or belligerent or like the old man get off
Yeah.
my lawn type of thing.
There's
And
a line in the middle.
Right? And so
Yeah.
it really is, it's kind of like, I think it was Jefferson who said, in matters of principle, stand firm like a rock. In matters of fashion, swim with the current. But it doesn't mean you have to swim in the crazy fast part of the current, just like a good, slow, steady part of what the current is. Yeah.
Very good.
That is so brilliant. I highly recommend you watch his TED Talk on it, because I feel like this was a big issue for me growing up, because there was the big companies like IBM where you had to wear a suit and everything else, and that was like the trend to talk about this. And now it's like no one talks about it. You're probably one of one. I don't hear this come up that you're a men's fashion consultant.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different, and it's harder to navigate now than it would have been when we were younger, because it's easy to wear the uniform of a suit.
Yeah.
Now, it's so different in every workplace, in every city. It's so different to navigate, and so you actually have to think more consciously about it.
That's beautiful. So what parting advice would you have? You're an entrepreneur and also running this brand. What advice do you have for other entrepreneurs out there?
I would say that the biggest thing that I can offer is find what your integrity is. And this does apply from both a business perspective and from a style perspective, because I know for me, a lot of times I get kind of caught up in well, what if I scale to this and I bring on this team and I can get this kind of exit or anything else? And it's like, does that really give me the life that I want more than what I currently love about my life? And it's very easy to fall into entrepreneurial trends that may not actually be in alignment with or congruent with what my desired goals are, just like it's easy to fall into sartorial trends that aren't in alignment with who we are. And so it's actually having, I would say, the self-awareness, the courage, and the integrity to find out what it is you actually want, and then pursuing that as opposed to just jumping on whatever the trend is that may be the shiniest object at the time.
So
That's
powerful.
really good.
So powerful. Honor to have you, Tanner.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Such a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna do some cool reels, right, Aaron?
Yeah,
in this
we
one,
are.
like have some fashion stuff thrown in
Yeah.
and some cool things.
Awesome.
It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you, guys.
so
I really
much.
appreciate it.
If any of you watching today have any doubts that your current CPA is not helping you take 100% advantage of the deductions you deserve and helping you stay compliant with the IRS, then don't hesitate to get involved with TaxHive today. You won't be disappointed.